The homeless woman stood in front of the building and whispered, "This place is mine." People laughed, until a security guard noticed the document in her shaking hands. When the truth began to sink in, faces went pale and the entire crowd froze in silence. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment where in the world you're watching from, because now I'm going to tell you everything. The wind bit through her thin jacket. Chloe stood on the sidewalk, her feet numb inside her worn-out shoes. She didn't feel the cold anymore, not really. Her eyes were fixed on the giant glass doors of the Harrington Tower. A small hand gripped the leg of her jeans. Riley stood silent beside her, her face hidden by a too large beanie. "We can't stay here long, Bug," Chloe whispered, her voice rough. "Just a minute. You, girl." The voice was clean and sharp, like ice. A man in a long dark coat was walking toward the building's entrance. His shoes shone under the streetlights. He stopped a few feet from them, his nose wrinkled. "This is not a place for you," he said. He didn't yell. His calmness was worse than shouting. "Move along. You're blocking the path." Chloe felt Riley press closer. She lifted her chin. "We're not blocking anything." The man's eyes, a pale, chilly blue, swept over their dirty clothes. A short, humorless laugh escaped him. "You are an eyesore. This is a building for important people, for success. You are the opposite of that. You are trash waiting to be collected. Now go away." He turned and walked toward the doors. A man in a security uniform, Paul, hurried to open the door for him. The rich man walked inside without a backward look. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. Her hand tightened into a fist around the crumpled paper in her pocket. She looked up at the towering walls of glass and steel, so high they disappeared into the dark sky. "It's mine," she whispered, so quietly only Riley could hear. The security guard, Paul, finished his task and then walked over to them. His face was kind but tired. "Miss, I'm real sorry, but you heard Mr. Harrington. You can't stand here. He's the owner. I'll get in trouble if you stay." "He's not the owner," Chloe said. The words came out flat and solid. Paul sighed, like he'd heard this before. "I know how it is. The world isn't fair, but this is private property. You and your little girl have to find somewhere else. There's a shelter a few blocks over. I can give you directions." "She's my sister," Chloe corrected him automatically. Her fingers pulled the folded paper from her pocket. It was old, the creases almost worn through. "And we're not on private property. We're on my property." Paul's eyes went from her face to the paper in her grimy hand. It didn't look like trash. It had a formal seal at the bottom, visible even in the poor light. "What is that?" "Proof," Chloe said. She didn't hand it to him. She just held it so he could see. Hesitantly, Paul reached out. "Can I see that for a second?" Chloe paused, then placed the brittle paper in his palm. She watched his face. His eyes moved slowly across the faded typing. He saw the words "land parcel" and "granted to" and the name Charles Miller. He saw the date, written in cursive, the 12th day of October, 1932. He looked up at the building, then back at the paper, his mouth opened slightly. "Charles Miller? My great-grandfather," Chloe said. Her voice was still a low rasp, but it carried now. "He built the first building that ever stood right here, a workshop. He owned this land, all of it." Paul stared at the deed. His thumb brushed over the official stamp. It felt real. The paper felt old, important. He looked at Chloe with new eyes, no longer seeing just a homeless woman, but a person with a name, with a history planted under his own feet. Inside the warm lobby, Alastair Harrington stood at the reception desk. He glanced out the window. He saw his security guard still talking to the trash. He saw the guard holding a piece of paper. A slow, cold trickle of irritation began to flow. This was taking too long. Across the street, a man sat in a parked car, the engine running for warmth. Ben Miller had watched the whole scene. He saw Harrington speak to the woman. He saw the guard approach. He was about to drive away, late for his own meeting, when he saw the guard studying a document. The woman stood straighter. Ben couldn't hear the words, but he could see the shift in their stances. It was no longer a guard moving someone along. It was a conversation. He rolled down his window a little, letting in the cold air. He was about to call out, to tell Paul to wrap it up, when he saw Harrington burst back through the shiny doors of the tower. The man's calm mask was gone. His face was tight with anger as he marched toward the guard and the two ragged figures on the sidewalk. Ben turned off his car engine. Something was wrong. He opened the car door and stepped out into the bitter Chicago evening, his lawyer's instinct pulling him toward the conflict. He didn't know why yet, but the name Miller was already echoing in the back of his mind, a quiet, persistent bell he had spent his whole life trying not to hear. "What is the meaning of this?" Alastair Harrington's voice cut through the cold air. He stood 2 feet away, his eyes on Paul, the security guard. "I told you to have them removed." Paul didn't flinch. He held the old paper carefully. "Sir, you need to see this." "I need to see nothing from the gutter," Harrington said. But his eyes flicked to the document. He snatched it from Paul's hand. He read it quickly. His face, which was pink from the cold and anger, slowly lost its color. It became a flat, pale white. For a long moment, he said nothing. He just stared at the deed in his gloved hands. Chloe watched him. She felt Riley's small fingers dig into her palm. She squeezed back. "It's real," Chloe said, her voice quiet but clear. "This is garbage," Harrington spat, but the force was gone from his words. "A forgery, a pathetic trick." He looked at Paul. "You are a fool for believing this." A new voice spoke from near the street. "What seems to be the problem, Alastair?" Ben Miller walked up to the group. He tucked his hands into his coat pockets. He looked at his boss, then at the 2 dirty girls, then at the paper in Harrington's hand. "This person," Harrington said, waving the deed at Chloe, "is attempting a fraud, a ridiculous one." "May I?" Ben asked, nodding at the paper. Harrington shoved it toward him. Ben took it. He smoothed it gently against his chest. He was a lawyer. He knew how to look at documents. He saw the paper quality, the old-fashioned type, the official seal from Cook County. His eyes found the name of the grantee, *Charles Miller*. A strange stillness settled in his chest. He read the legal description of the land. It described the very block where they now stood. "This is a property deed," Ben said, mostly to himself. "It's a piece of trash," Harrington insisted. His calm was cracking. "She found it in a dumpster. She thinks it's a ticket to a payday." Ben looked at the young woman. "What is your name?" "Chloe Miller," she said. Her hazel eyes locked onto his, wary and defiant. The name hit Ben like a physical thing. *Miller*. He swallowed. "And Charles Miller?" "My great-grandfather." She nodded at the paper in his hands. "That says he owned this land, all of it. He built here first." Ben felt the world tilt slightly. The noise of the city faded. He heard his own heart beating in his ears. Miller was a common name. It had to be a coincidence, but the document in his hands felt heavy with truth. "This is a matter for the courts, Alastair," Ben said, his professional tone returning. "You cannot just ignore it. If this is verified—" "If," Harrington laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "It will not be verified, because it is a lie." He pointed a finger at Chloe. "You listen to me. You take your little stunt and you leave, now, or I will have you arrested for trespassing." Paul, the security guard, shifted his weight. "Sir, with respect, she's got a legal-looking paper. If we call the police on her and she shows them that, it might not look good for us. It might cause a scene you don't want." Harrington turned his icy gaze on Paul. "Are you giving me legal advice now? You are a security guard. Your job is to guard, so remove them." Ben spoke before Paul could answer. "Paul is right, Alastair. The safest path is through the system. We let a judge look at this. A judge will see it's fake, and the matter is closed, officially, publicly. No room for rumors." He was talking to his boss, but his eyes were on the deed again, on the name, *Miller*. Harrington's jaw tightened. He looked from Ben's careful face to Paul's worried one to Chloe's stubborn stare. He saw the little girl hiding behind her sister. He understood the threat. A scene, a rumor, a story about a rich man and a homeless girl fighting over a building. "Fine," he hissed. "Fine. Let the courts waste their time, but she," he said, pointing again at Chloe, "does not set 1 foot inside my building. Do you understand? They need to be somewhere for the night," Paul said softly. "The shelters are full. It's below freezing." "Not my problem," Harrington shouted. A few people walking by turned to look. He lowered his voice, fury vibrating in every word. "Do not make them my problem." Ben looked at Chloe and Riley. The little girl was shivering. He thought of the old unused storage room in the basement. It was in the building, but it was not the building Harrington cared about. It was a forgotten space. "There's the old boiler room annex," Ben said to Harrington. "It's separate from the main systems. It's just a concrete room. Let them stay there tonight. One night. It keeps them close. It keeps this situation contained. We can serve her the court papers there tomorrow." Harrington stared at Ben as if he had betrayed him, which, in his heart, Ben feared he just had. But the lawyer in him knew this was the cleanest, smartest move. "One night," Harrington finally said. He stepped close to Chloe. "You get one night in a basement, and then the courts will throw you out, and you will never come back." He turned and walked back into his tower without another word. The group stood in silence on the sidewalk. The wind blew. Ben Miller handed the fragile deed back to Chloe Miller. Their fingers did not touch. "You should keep this safe," he said. "I know," she replied, folding it and tucking it deep into her inner pocket. Paul let out a long breath. "Okay then, okay. Follow me. I'll show you the room. It's not much." "Is it warm?" Riley's voice was a tiny whisper, the first words she had spoken. Paul looked down at her, his face softening. "Yeah, kid, it's warm." As Paul led the two sisters toward a service entrance around the side, Ben Miller stood alone on the sidewalk. He looked up at the glowing windows of the Harrington Tower. He thought of the name on the wall in the lobby. He thought of the name on the paper in his pocket, a copy of the deed he had instinctively made before returning it. Both names were his, and for the first time in his life, that fact filled him with a deep, cold dread. The service door clicked shut behind them, cutting off the wind. The air inside was warm and smelled of concrete and old machinery. Paul led them down a narrow corridor with pipes running along the ceiling. "It's just down here," he said, his voice echoing slightly. Riley's hand was tight in Chloe's. Her eyes were huge, taking in the strange industrial world. They stopped at a heavy metal door. Paul pulled a large key from his ring and unlocked it. The door opened with a groan. The room was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. One bare light bulb hung from a wire. The walls were plain concrete blocks. In one corner sat an old desk and two broken office chairs. A single thin mattress without sheets lay on the floor. But along the far wall was a large, fat heating pipe. It hummed gently, radiating a dry, steady warmth. "It's the old boiler annex," Paul explained. "We don't use it for anything. No one comes down here." He looked embarrassed. "It's not much." Chloe stepped inside. She immediately walked to each corner, looking closely at the walls and floor. She checked behind the door. Riley watched her, understanding the ritual. Once Chloe was satisfied, she turned to Paul. "It's a roof," she said simply. "It's warm. Thank you." Paul nodded, relieved. "There's a restroom just left down the hall. The light switch is outside. I'll let you get settled. I'm on duty until 6 in the morning. If you need anything, just knock on the security office door. It's at the end of the main hall." "We'll be fine," Chloe said. After Paul left, closing the door softly, the silence settled. The hum of the pipe was a constant sound. Chloe took off her backpack. She began to unpack their few things with precise movements. 2 water bottles, a packet of crackers, 2 blankets, worn but clean. She arranged them neatly by the mattress. Riley walked to the big pipe and put her small hands on it. She closed her eyes. "Warm," she whispered. "Yeah," Chloe said. She sat on the edge of the mattress. The stillness of the room, the fact that they were not outside, let her mind go to places she usually kept locked. She looked around the concrete walls. This was her great-grandfather's land. Somewhere far above them, people walked on marble floors he probably paid for. The thought made her heart ache with a deep, old anger. "Chloe?" Riley's whisper was small in the room. "Will the bad man make us leave tomorrow?" Chloe opened her arms. Riley came over and curled into her lap. "No, Bug. He's going to try. But we have the paper. We have the truth." "What if they don't believe the truth?" Chloe rested her chin on top of Riley's head. She thought of her uncle, Frank, his mean smile. Someone didn't believe the truth a long time ago. That's how we lost this place. The memory was sharp. She was 10 years old. The police officer at the door. Her parents were not coming home. Then Frank was there, smelling of cheap beer. He didn't hug her. He looked around their nice house with greedy eyes. He sold it, Chloe said out loud, her voice flat. Uncle Frank, after Mom and Dad were gone, he said he was handling the family business. He sold this land right here to the Harringtons. He told me it was for some money to take care of us, but he didn't take care of us. He spent the money, then he gave you away. Riley's body went very still. She rarely asked about the time before Chloe found her. He gave me away, she whispered, when you were just a baby, to another family. He said he couldn't handle 2 kids. Chloe's voice cracked. Then, a few years later, he left me too. Just disappeared. I was alone, but I never stopped looking for you. I had this one paper, the deed, hidden in my stuff. Frank didn't even know about it. It was my only real thing, our only real thing. She held Riley tighter. And now we're back where it started, right under their feet, and I have the paper. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the pipe hum. Upstairs in the glittering tower, the world of Alistair Harrington went on. Down here, in the warm basement, a different kind of claim was being staked. Not with money, but with memory, and with the sheer stubborn will of 2 sisters who had nowhere else to go. Chloe knew the fight was just beginning, but for the first night in a very long time, they were not cold. Ben Miller's office was quiet. The clock on the wall read 10. The sound of the city was a distant hum through the thick windows. He sat at his large desk, but he was not working on the papers in front of him. His eyes were fixed on a single sheet. It was the copy he had made of Chloe Miller's deed. The name Asterisk, Charles Miller Asterisk, stared back at him. It's a common name, he said to the empty room. His own voice sounded unconvincing. He had spent the evening searching through old digital archives the law firm kept, property records, transaction histories. He found the official sale of the land from the year 1972. It was sold by a Frank Miller to Alistair Harrington's father. That must be the uncle Chloe mentioned, but something about the earlier records was messy, incomplete. He dug deeper into a box of physical files marked Harrington Family Historical. He found folders from his grandfather's time. His grandfather, William Miller, had been the Harrington family lawyer too. Ben pulled out a brittle stack of papers. There were letters, notes in his grandfather's handwriting. He began to read. 30 minutes later, Ben put the last paper down. His hands were cold. His stomach felt like a heavy stone. He picked up his phone. He called his mother in Florida. "Ben, it's late. Is everything okay?" her sleepy voice asked. "Mom, I need to ask you something about Grandpa William." "What about him? Did he ever talk about his work? For the Harringtons? Specifically about a piece of land downtown where the Harrington Tower is now?" There was a long pause on the line. "Why are you asking this, Ben?" "It's important. Please." His mother sighed. He didn't talk about work much. He was a proud man. But once he had too much to drink at Thanksgiving, years ago. He said something about the foundation of their fortune being built on a blind man's X mark. I asked what he meant. He got angry. He said to forget I heard it. He said some things were better left in the past. Ben closed his eyes. "Thanks, Mom. Go back to sleep." He hung up. The pieces clicked together. The notes in the file showed his grandfather arranging a meeting in 1932. The meeting was between Charles Miller and Silas Harrington, Alistair's grandfather. Charles Miller could not read well. The papers he signed were not what he was told they were. They were not a business loan. They were a sale. His grandfather had witnessed it. He had notarized it. He had helped steal a man's land. And now Ben worked for the thief's grandson in the building on that stolen land. He felt sick. The guilt was a physical weight. He thought of Chloe Miller's hard, tired eyes. He thought of the little girl, Riley, hiding behind her. The next morning, Ben walked down to the basement. Paul was just coming out of the security office. "Morning, Mr. Miller. They're still in the room. I brought them some toast from the cafeteria." "Thank you, Paul," Ben said. He walked to the metal door and knocked softly. Chloe opened it. She looked like she hadn't slept. She stood blocking the entrance. "What do you want?" "To talk. May I come in?" She studied his face for a long moment, then stepped aside. Riley was sitting on the mattress, sorting her collection of shinies on the blanket. Ben stood in the middle of the small concrete room. He felt like an intruder. "I looked into your deed," he began. "I bet you did. I found more than the deed. I found my grandfather's files, William Miller." Chloe's eyes narrowed. "Your grandfather?" Ben nodded. He looked at the floor. then forced himself to meet her gaze. My grandfather worked for Silas Harrington, Alastair's grandfather. In 1932, they had a meeting with your great-grandfather Charles. Your great-grandfather, he trusted them. He could not read the papers they put in front of him. They told him it was one thing, it was another. My grandfather was there. He watched him sign. He made it legal. The room was silent except for the hum of the pipe. Riley had stopped playing with her bottle caps. She was watching Ben. Your grandfather helped steal my family's land, Chloe said. Her voice was dangerously quiet. Yes, Ben said. The word felt like glass in his throat. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know, but I know now. And I can't work for him anymore. Not on this. Chloe crossed her arms. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to help you. I want to be your lawyer. I have the files. I have the proof of what they did. I can take it to the judge. Chloe let out a short, harsh laugh. Why? Because you feel bad? I don't need your guilt, Mr. Miller. I need a win. I know you don't trust me. You shouldn't. My name is on the wrong side of this history. He took a step closer. But I am a good lawyer, and this is the right side. Let me help you, because it's right. Let me fix what my family broke. He held his breath. He watched her think. He saw her look at Riley, who gave a tiny, almost invisible nod. Your boss will fire you, Chloe said. I know. He will hate you. I know that too. She stared at him for a full minute. Finally, she gave one sharp nod. Okay, you're my lawyer. But if you try to trick me, if you side with him later, I won't, Ben said. And for the first time in his professional life, he was sure of his next move. He was not working for the Harrington name anymore. He was working to erase its lie. The door to Alastair Harrington's office did not open quietly. Ben pushed it open and walked inside. Harrington stood by the window, his back to the room. You went to see her, Harrington said, his voice calm and cold. He didn't turn around. I did, Ben replied. He placed a folder on the massive desk. And I have reviewed the historical documents. The 1932 deed is legitimate. Furthermore, I have found evidence that the subsequent transaction with Silas Harrington was fraudulent. Your grandfather, with the help of my grandfather, deceived Charles Miller. Harrington turned slowly. His face was a mask of controlled rage. I pay you to protect my interests, not to dig up ancient history from the gutter. My job is to deal with the facts, Ben said. The facts are not on your side, Alastair. I can't defend this in court. Not honestly. Then don't defend it honestly. Harrington slammed a hand on the desk. Find a way. That is what I pay you for. You twist the facts until they fit. Ben stood very still. No, I won't do that. Not this time. I am withdrawing as your counsel. Effective immediately. I will be representing Chloe Miller. The silence in the room was thick and heavy. Harrington's pale eyes widened, then narrowed to slits. He walked around the desk until he was standing right in front of Ben. You are a traitor, he whispered, the words full of venom. You are a small, disloyal man. You are fired. Get out of my building. Your belongings will be sent to you. Your security clearance is revoked. Ben simply nodded. He turned and walked out. He didn't look back. 2 hours later, Chloe and Riley were in the basement room. Paul had brought a small television and set it on the old desk. You should see this, he had said, his face grim. On the screen was a local news station. A reporter stood in front of the Harrington Tower. The caption read, Billionaire battles basement squatter. Then Alastair Harrington appeared. He was in a different suit, looking solemn and dignified. He stood at a podium with his new lawyers behind him. It is with a heavy heart that I address this situation, he began, his voice full of false sadness. A troubled young woman has presented a forged document. She is attempting to claim ownership of this building, a landmark my family built and nurtured. She is exploiting the system. She is exploiting your sympathy. The reporter asked a question. Mr. Harrington, she claims to be a descendant of the original owner. Do you have proof her document is fake? Our legal team has examined it. It is a crude forgery. She is clearly being coached by a disgruntled former employee with a personal grudge. This is a shakedown, nothing more. She does not want a home. She wants a payout. Chloe stared at the screen, her hands clenched into fists. Riley pressed against her side. On TV, Harrington's expression softened into one of pity. I am a compassionate man. I have offered this poor woman a significant amount of money, enough to find a real home, to get help. She has refused. This proves her true motive is not justice, but greed and chaos. He looked directly into the camera, his eyes seeming to find Chloe in her basement room. Take the money, Miss Miller. Take it and walk away. Stop this cruel charade. The news segment cut back to the studio anchors, who began discussing the bizarre claim. Chloe reached over and turned the television off. The room was quiet again, just the hum of the pipe. Paul broke the silence. He's lying, to everyone. I know, Chloe said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned. He did offer money, Paul said cautiously. A lot of it. His assistant called down. They want to meet with you tomorrow to hand over a check, if you sign papers saying you give up all claims. Riley looked up at Chloe, her small face worried. Chloe stood up. She walked to the concrete wall and placed her palm flat against it. It felt solid, real. This isn't about money, she said, more to herself than to them. He thinks everyone has a price. He thinks I'm just like my Uncle Frank, that I'll take the cash and run. She turned to face Paul and Riley. But I'm not. This building, it's the last piece of my family that wasn't stolen or sold. It's my great-grandfather's work. It's my parents' memory. It's a future for her, she said, nodding at Riley. I don't want his money. I want my home back. She sat back down on the mattress, pulling Riley close. Tell his assistant no thank you. We'll see him in court. Upstairs, Alistair Harrington watched the news coverage on his own screen. A satisfied smile played on his lips. He had framed the narrative. He was the reasonable benefactor. She was the unstable beggar. The public would believe him. But when his assistant called to report Chloe's refusal, the smile vanished. His fist clenched around a crystal paperweight. She was supposed to take the money. Everyone always took the money. For the first time, a thread of real fear wove through his anger. She wasn't behaving like a rational person. She was behaving like someone who had nothing left to lose, and that made her dangerously unpredictable. Ben Miller sat at his kitchen table, papers spread everywhere. It was late. The news played quietly on the television in the other room, but he wasn't watching. He was looking at a birth certificate he had finally managed to request. It was for a girl named Riley Ann Miller, born 8 years ago. Parents, James and Eliza Miller. The same parents listed on Chloe's own birth records, the same parents who died in a car crash. He stared at the paper. A sister. Not just a child she was protecting, but her own blood. He thought of how Chloe always called Riley Bug, not Sweetie or Honey, a specific nickname. He thought of how fiercely she shielded her, how Riley mirrored Chloe's wary silence. It wasn't just two people who found each other on the streets. It was a family that had been torn apart. The next day, Ben went to the basement room. Paul was already there, having brought 2 cups of hot soup. Ben, Paul nodded. She's not in a great mood. The TV people have been calling down trying to get an interview. I'm not surprised, Ben said. He knocked. Chloe opened the door. She looked even more tired. What now? We need to talk. About your case. About everything. He stepped inside. Riley was drawing on a piece of scrap paper with a pencil Paul had given her. We're talking, Chloe said, crossing her arms. Ben took a deep breath. He decided to be direct. Riley is your sister. Your biological sister. Chloe went very still. Her eyes flicked to Riley, who had stopped drawing and was now listening. What's it to you? It matters to the case. It shows your deep, lifelong connection to the family legacy. It's not just about an old piece of paper for you. It's about providing for your only living family. I don't need to use her for your case, Chloe snapped. I'm not asking you to use her. I'm telling you I know, and I want to understand. Ben's voice was gentle. The court will find out anyway. Tell me so I'm not surprised, so I can help you better. Paul shifted uncomfortably near the door. Chloe stared at Ben for a long time. She finally sat down on the mattress and patted the space next to her for Riley. The little girl came over and leaned into her. Our parents died, Chloe began, her voice flat, like she was reciting a terrible fact. I was 10. Riley was 1. Our uncle Frank, he was made our guardian. He wasn't a good man. She kept her hand on Riley's back. He saw 2 kids as a problem, and he saw our parents' house, their savings, and that land downtown as his answer. He sold the land to Harrington's father first, quick cash, Then he gave Riley away. Riley looked up at Chloe's face. He gave you to another family bug, Chloe said, her voice softening just for her. He told me you'd be better off. He told me it was temporary. It was a lie. Then, a few years later, he emptied the bank account and left me too. I was 14. The room was silent. Paul looked at the floor. I lived in shelters, then on the streets, but I never forgot. I asked everyone. I looked for a little girl named Riley Miller. It took me years. She looked down at Riley's hair. I found her in a park. She was with a group of other kids. No family, just lost, like me. How did you know it was her? Ben asked quietly. Chloe gave a sad, small smile. She had our mother's eyes, and she was wearing a tiny silver bracelet. It was tarnished black. Our mom put it on her when she was a baby. It had her name engraved inside, Riley. Frank didn't even bother to take it off her. Ben let out a long breath. The story was worse than he imagined. So, when I say this building is my home, Chloe said, looking first at Ben, then at Paul, I don't mean a fancy apartment. I mean a place with a locked door. A place where no one can take her away from me again. A place where we belong. That's what my great-grandfather built. That's what they stole. Not just land. A family's chance to be safe. Paul cleared his throat, his voice thick. I'm so sorry, Chloe. Ben nodded. Thank you for telling me. This changes how we present everything. It's not a property dispute. It's a fight to reunite a family on their own land. He gathered his papers. Harrington is going to fight dirty. He already is. Knowing this, he might try to use it, to say you're unstable, that you took her. Chloe's face hardened. Let him try. I have the birth certificates now. I have the police reports from when I reported her missing for all those years. I have proof. For the first time, Ben saw something other than survival or anger in her eyes. He saw the determined, relentless love of an older sister. It was the strongest legal argument he had ever seen. Okay, Ben said. Then we fight with that. He left the room, his mind racing with a new strategy. Paul stayed behind for a moment. You're a good sister, Chloe, he said softly. Chloe just nodded, pulling Riley closer. She didn't need his praise. She just needed to win. For Riley. For the memory of a porch swing she could barely recall, but whose feeling of safety she was determined to rebuild, one brick at a time. Alistair Harrington sat in the dark of his office. The city lights glittered outside, but he saw only the papers on his desk. The latest court filing from Ben Miller. It was strong. It included the story about the two sisters. It made them look sympathetic. It made him look like a monster. He picked up his phone. He dialed a number from memory. A man answered on the third ring. Carl, I have a job. It needs to be quiet. It needs to be tonight. He listened to the low voice on the other end. Yes, the building. The service entrance on the south side. The security code is 5570. There is a room in the sub-basement, boiler annex. A woman and a child will be sleeping there. You need to take one thing, an old piece of paper. It will be on her person or hidden very close. Find it. Bring it to me. Do not be seen. Do not hurt anyone. He paused. But if you must, do what you need to do. He hung up. He did not feel good about it. He felt necessary. This was about survival. In the basement, Chloe was awake. Riley slept beside her, breathing softly. Chloe stared at the ceiling. She could hear Paul's footsteps in the hall outside on his last rounds. He paused at their door, like he always did. She heard the gentle tap of his knuckles. Everything okay in there? His voice came, muffled by the metal. We're fine, Paul. Thank you. Okay, I'm clocking out. The night guy, Jeff, he's at the front desk. He doesn't come down here much. You have the phone number I gave you? I have it. Call if anything feels off, anything at all. I will. She heard his footsteps walk away. She lay in the dark, listening to the building settle. She reached under the thin mattress and touched the edges of the deed, safe in its plastic bag. Then she began her ritual. She checked the position of the desk against the door. She felt for the water bottles within reach. She listened. It was sometime after 2 in the morning when a different sound came. Not the hum of the pipe, not the distant rush of the furnace. It was a soft scrape at the door. Chloe's eyes flew open. She sat up slowly, without a sound. Riley stirred, but stayed asleep. The scrape came again, then a faint click. Someone was working on the lock from the outside. Chloe's heart hammered. She slid out from under the blanket. She put on her shoes without lacing them. She gently shook Riley's shoulder, putting a finger to her own lips when the little girl's eyes opened. Riley understood immediately. She sat up silent and reached for her own shoes. Chloe moved to the door. She pressed her ear against the cold metal. She heard a low curse, then the sound of a tool turning. The lock was old. It was giving way. She backed away. She looked around the bare room. There was nothing to use as a weapon, nothing but themselves and the truth. She grabbed Riley's hand and pulled her into the farthest, darkest corner behind the bulk of the heating pipe. They crouched down. The lock gave a final metallic pop. The door swung open slowly. A large man in dark clothes stood silhouetted in the dim hall light. He stepped inside. He turned on a small flashlight. The beam swept over the empty mattress, the desk. He moved quietly, quickly. He lifted the mattress. He searched the desk drawers. He was looking for something specific. Chloe held her breath. Riley's hand was ice cold in hers. The man turned. His light started to move toward their corner. Suddenly, a bright overhead light flooded the room from the hallway. Paul stood in the doorway. He wasn't in his uniform jacket. He was in a t-shirt, but he held his heavy security flashlight like a club. "Hey!" Paul's voice boomed in the small space. "What are you doing?" The intruder spun around, startled. He shoved Paul hard, trying to get past him into the hall. Paul was older, but he was solid. He didn't fall. He grabbed the man's arm. "Chloe, run! Get Jeff!" Chloe didn't run. She stood up, pulling Riley with her. "Paul, he's here for the deed." The intruder yanked his arm free and threw a punch. Paul grunted and swung his flashlight. It connected with the man's shoulder. The two men stumbled into the hallway, grappling. Chloe rushed to the door. "Stop! We've called the police!" she yelled. It was a bluff, but it made the intruder hesitate. Paul used that second to shove the man against the wall. "Jeff, sub-basement, now!" he shouted down the corridor. The sound of running footsteps echoed from upstairs. The intruder heard it too. With a final furious snarl, he pushed Paul away and bolted down the hall, disappearing into the dark maze of service tunnels. Paul slumped against the wall, breathing hard. A trickle of blood ran from his lip. Chloe ran to him. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he panted. "Are you? Is Riley?" Riley nodded, her eyes huge. "He was sent," Chloe said, her voice shaking now that the danger was passing. "Harrington sent him." Paul nodded, wiping his lip. He pulled his cell phone from his pocket. His hands were unsteady. "No more waiting. We're calling the police for real. Right now. And then I'm calling Ben." He dialed 3 numbers. He put the phone to his ear. "Yes, I need to report a burglary and an assault. At the Harrington Tower. Send officers, please." The Cook County Courthouse felt too big and too quiet. Chloe sat at a long wooden table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She wore clean clothes that Ben had helped her get, but they felt strange on her. Riley sat in a chair right next to her, her legs not reaching the floor. Paul sat on the other side of Riley, his security uniform replaced by a simple button-down shirt. He gave Chloe a small, reassuring nod. At the next table sat Alastair Harrington with 2 new lawyers. He stared straight ahead, his face like stone. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, entered the room. Everyone stood up, then sat down again. "This is the matter of Miller versus Harrington," the judge said. "Each side will present their final arguments. Mr. Miller, you may begin." Ben stood up. He looked tired but calm. He walked to the center of the room. "Your Honor, this case is simple. It is about a home that was stolen twice. First, in 1932, when Silas Harrington and William Miller tricked a man who could not read into signing away his land. And second, in the 1970s, when a desperate uncle, Frank Miller, sold a property that was not truly his to sell because the original theft made all later sales invalid. He held up the original deed, now in a clear protective frame. This is the true title. It connects Chloe Miller and Riley Miller directly to the land. It has never been legally voided." He then walked to a large screen. He showed old letters from his grandfather's file. He showed the police report from the break-in at the basement room. He showed the birth certificates proving Chloe and Riley were sisters. "Mr. Harrington has offered money," Ben continued. "But my client does not want money. She wants the home that was taken from her family. She wants a safe place for her sister. The law is on her side. The truth is on her side." He sat down. Harrington's lead lawyer stood up. He was a man with a loud voice. "Your Honor, this is fantasy. A forgery and a tall tale. My client's family has owned and improved this land for decades. They have paid taxes, they have built a landmark. This woman appears from nowhere with a story designed to trigger sympathy. She refused a generous settlement. This shows her true goal is disruption, not justice. The lawyer talked for a long time. He called the deed a fake. He said the stories about 1932 were lies. He said Chloe was unstable. Chloe listened, her back stiff. Riley slipped her small hand into Chloe's. When the loud lawyer finished, the judge looked at both tables. I have reviewed all the evidence submitted. Is there anything else? Ben stood again. Yes, Your Honor. One more thing. He held up a single sheet of paper. This is a signed statement from the private investigator hired by Mr. Harrington, the man who was arrested for the break-in at the tower. In this statement, he confirms that Mr. Harrington hired him to steal the original deed, to destroy the evidence. A gasp went through the small audience in the room. Harrington's head snapped toward his lawyer. His face turned a deep red. This is a lie, Harrington blurted out, standing up. Mr. Harrington, you will be silent, the judge said firmly. She took the paper from Ben. She read it carefully. She looked at Harrington for a long, silent moment. Then she put the paper down. The evidence is clear, the judge said. Her voice was steady and final. The property known as the Harrington Tower rightfully belongs to the descendants of Charles Miller. The title is restored to Chloe Miller as the direct heir. The previous sales are invalid due to the established fraud at the origin. She banged her gavel once. Judgment for the plaintiff. For a second, there was no sound. Then Paul let out a loud breath. Ben put a hand on Chloe's shoulder, his eyes bright. Chloe felt the world swim around her. She looked down at Riley. Did you hear that, Bug? Riley nodded, her own eyes wide. Our home? Our home, Chloe whispered, pulling her into a tight hug. Across the room, Alistair Harrington was on his feet. This is an outrage. I will appeal. This is not over. The judge was not looking at him anymore. She was gathering her papers. One of Harrington's lawyers leaned over and spoke softly, urgently. Alistair, don't. The statement from the hired man, an appeal is impossible now. It's over. You need to leave. Harrington looked from his lawyer's worried face to Chloe holding her sister. He saw Ben Miller, his former employee, smiling with relief. He saw the security guard, Paul, clapping Ben on the back. He saw it all slipping away. The tower, his name on the wall, his proof that he was better than his father. All of it, gone. The stone face finally cracked, revealing pure, naked loss. He turned and walked out of the courtroom alone, his shoulders slumped. A court officer walked over to Chloe's table. He handed her a formal document. This is the order, Miss Miller. The building is legally yours. You can take possession immediately. Chloe took the paper. It felt different from the old deed. This one was new and crisp and official. Ben smiled. Congratulations, Chloe. It's yours. What do I do now? She asked, the reality suddenly pressing down on her. You go home, Paul said gently. Chloe looked at the paper, then at Riley, then at the tall windows of the courthouse. Beyond them, somewhere in the city, a giant glass tower was waiting. It was no longer a fortress to be stormed. It was a house with the lights on, and for the first time in her life, she had the key. The glass doors of the tower were held open for her. The same lobby that had felt like a fortress now felt different. The marble floor was just a floor. The high ceiling was just a ceiling. Chloe walked in, holding Riley's hand. Ben and Paul walked beside them. The people working at the front desk looked up. They had seen the news. They knew who she was. They did not know what to say. A man in a suit hurried over. He was the building manager, Mr. Evans. He had worked for Harrington. Miss Miller, congratulations. We were not sure when you would arrive. Mr. Harrington's personal items have been removed from the executive suite. Would you like to see it now? Yes, Chloe said. They took the elevator to the very top floor. The doors opened into a private lobby. Then Mr. Evans opened a set of double doors. The office was enormous. One entire wall was glass, looking out over Chicago and the lake. The desk was a huge, shiny piece of wood. There were fancy chairs, a wet bar. It was silent and cold. This is ridiculous, Chloe said softly. Riley let go of her hand and walked across the vast, empty rug. She looked tiny. She stopped in front of the big desk and just stared at it. Ben looked around. "It's a lot." "It's not a home," Chloe said. "It's a throne." "I don't want a throne." She walked to the window. She could see for miles. She saw the city's rooftops, the streets, the parks. She saw the parts of the city that were not shiny. "What do you want?" Paul asked. He stood near the door, like he still felt he should be guarding it. Chloe turned to face them. "When we were in the basement, I promised Riley a porch, a safe place." She looked at Ben. "You said this case was about a home stolen twice. I can't just take it back from me. That makes me no better than him. It just changes the name on the door." She walked over to the giant desk. She put her hand on its cold surface. "This building was supposed to be my family's legacy, a place to build a life. Harrington turned it into a machine to make money. I want to turn it back into what it was supposed to be, a place for people to build lives." Ben nodded slowly. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means we don't need a fancy office," Chloe said. "We need apartments for people who have none, like we had none. We need a doctor's office so people don't have to ignore a cough until it's too late. We need a kitchen that gives hot food. We need a home, not just for us, but for anyone who needs one." Mr. Evans, the manager, cleared his throat. He looked nervous. "Miss Miller, with respect, the costs, the building's finances are structured for premium office and retail space. What you're describing it's not profitable." "I'm not looking for a profit," Chloe said. She looked at Ben. "Is the building paid for? No big loans?" Ben shook his head. "Harrington owned it outright. No debt. It's yours, free and clear." "Then we don't need a big profit," Chloe said. "We just need enough to keep the lights on and the water hot. We can use the money from the lower floor shops and the offices we keep. We can ask for donations. We can make it work." A slow smile spread across Paul's face. "I like it." Riley came back to Chloe's side. "Our light?" she whispered, pointing up at a huge chandelier. "No, Bug," Chloe said, kneeling down to her level. "That's not our light. Our light will be in a window, in a room with a door that locks. For us, and for other people too. A lot of windows with lights on." She stood up and looked at Mr. Evans. "I want you to get me plans. I want to see how we can change the top 10 floors into apartments. Good ones, with real kitchens and bathrooms. I want plans for a clinic on the second floor, and a big dining room and kitchen on the ground floor, next to the lobby." Mr. Evans blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely." He looked at her determined face, then at the sprawling, empty office. He gave a small, resigned nod. "I'll start gathering the architectural plans this afternoon." After he left, the three of them stood in the quiet office. Ben broke the silence. "You'll need a lawyer to set up a nonprofit, to handle all the new rules." "Are you applying for the job?" Chloe asked. "If you'll have me," Ben said. "I'll have you." She turned to Paul. "And I'll need someone to keep this place safe, not to keep people out, to keep the people inside safe." Paul straightened his shoulders. "I'd be honored, Chloe." Chloe took one last look around the huge, cold room. Then she walked to the door. Riley followed her. Ben and Paul followed too. "Where are we going now?" Ben asked. "Down," Chloe said, pressing the elevator button. "We're going to start where we started, in the basement. We have a lot of work to plan, and I don't think well in a room that's bigger than my whole life used to be." The elevator doors closed on the shiny office, leaving it empty and waiting. Downstairs, in the warm hum of the basement, the real work was about to begin. The sounds were different now. Instead of only the hum of the boiler and the quiet of an empty hall, the ground floor buzzed with life. The smell of roasting vegetables and baking bread filled the air. Chloe stood with Riley just inside the main doors. The shiny lobby was still there, but now one whole side was open to a big, bright room. Long tables filled it. People sat talking and eating hot food. A sign on the wall said, "The Miller Kitchen, all are welcome." Paul walked over to them, a big smile on his face. He was talking to a woman with 2 young children. He pointed toward the elevators. When he saw Chloe and Riley, he came over. 30 families moved into the apartments this week, Paul said. The Lopez kids already found the game room. Good, Chloe said. She looked at the busy kitchen. Is Maria okay with the lunch rush? She's in her element. She's got 3 volunteers helping. Ben came down the main staircase holding a stack of papers. The city inspector just left. The clinic on 2 is fully approved. Dr. Ray starts seeing patients on Monday. He handed Chloe a paper. It was a drawing from a little girl named Sophia on the 5th floor. It showed a tall building with hearts in the windows. The words at the top said, "Thank you for my room." Riley looked at the drawing. She pointed to a small heart in a corner window. "That's us," she whispered. "Yeah," Chloe said, her throat tight. "That's us." "Come on," Ben said. "There's one more thing to see." They took the elevator. It stopped not at the top, but on the 8th floor. The doors opened onto a quiet hallway with soft lights. It felt calm. There were doors, just like a normal apartment building. Ben led them to a door marked 8B. He handed a key to Chloe. "This one's yours," he said simply. Chloe looked at him, then at Paul. She put the key in the lock and turned it. She pushed the door open. It was not huge. It was not a fancy office. It was a living room with 2 windows, a small kitchen with a real stove. A hallway led to 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. The floors were warm wood. The walls were a soft yellow. It was empty of furniture, but it was full of light. Riley ran inside. Her footsteps echoed. She went to the biggest window and looked out. She could see the park. She turned to Chloe, her eyes shining. "Our light?" Chloe walked over and stood beside her. She put her arm around Riley's shoulders. "Yes, Bug, our light, in our window." Ben and Paul stayed in the doorway. "The furniture comes tomorrow," Paul said. "Beds, a couch, a kitchen table. Simple stuff." "And the porch?" Riley asked, turning around. Chloe smiled. She walked to the window and unlocked it. She pushed it open. There was a small wrought iron balcony, just big enough for 2 people to stand on. The sounds of the city floated up. "Our porch," Chloe said. Riley joined her, looking out at the view. She didn't see a trophy or a tower. She saw home. Chloe turned back to Ben and Paul, who were still waiting at the threshold. "Are you 2 just going to stand in the hallway?" Ben smiled. Paul chuckled. "Come in," Chloe said. "It's your home too." They stepped inside. Ben put his stack of papers on the kitchen counter. Paul tested the lock on the front door, out of habit. From the window, they could see down to the street. People were walking into the building for a warm meal. A woman with a baby in a stroller was being greeted at the new clinic entrance. The building was no longer cold. It was full. It was working. It was finally doing what it was always meant to do: provide shelter, provide safety, provide a place to start again. Chloe looked at her sister, her friend the guard, her friend the lawyer. They were not a normal family, but they were a real one, forged in a fight over a piece of paper and built into something stronger than steel or glass. "We did good," Paul said, looking around the empty, sunlit room. "We're just starting," Chloe replied. But for now, they were still. They were home. The door was closed and it was locked. And for the first time in forever, that lock was to keep the good in, not the bad out.